On today's show, the biggest game of the year for the Cleveland Cavaliers has arrived against the Boston Celtics. There are a couple of very important matchups I think the Cavs need to win, plus a couple of other things to watch in Friday night's game on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like Cleveland Magazine, 93.3 The Fan, my new Substack, The Inside Shot, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Cleveland Cavaliers taking on the Boston Celtics tonight in what is, I believe, the most important regular season game that the Cavs will have all season. And I think without question, the most important regular season game that they have between right now, as I record this on Thursday night, as you listen to this Friday morning potentially, and the end of the season. I don't think there's another game that has quite the same stakes or of this magnitude left before the postseason arrives. And then once the postseason arrives, obviously they're all bigger than this one. But for now, I think that this is a massive game. And I don't love doing just game preview stuff on the day of a game because it's just, I don't think necessarily always makes for the best stuff. But this game is so important that I do think that looking ahead at this game and the specifics of it is the best thing I can do for any Cavs fan today is talk specifically about this game and what to watch for, what to look at. And the first thing that pops into my mind is Evan Mobley. And what is he going to look like on Friday night against the Boston Celtics? Because against Boston so far this year, Mobley's been a bit of a mixed bag. You go back to the November 19th matchup in Boston that the Cavs lost. Evan Mobley was fantastic in that game. He was a big reason why the Cavs were able to come back from trailing. I believe they trailed by as many as 19 or 20 points in that game. And a big reason why they came back was Evan Mobley. And then you saw that the Cavs didn't necessarily go to Mobley in the fourth quarter of that game. And after the game, Kenny Atkinson talked about needing to make sure Evan is more involved and that would be more of a focal point moving forward, right? Like we all remember what that was like because Evan was so good in that game. And then in the next two games against Boston, it wasn't the same. And that's where I think Friday night becomes very important because what was the difference between the first game that the Cavs played against the Celtics and games number 2 and 3? Now, if the Cavs won the second of the 3 games that they've played, and of course they lost the third, same way they lost the first, but in games 2 and 3, in which Evan Mobley had 2 of his worst games of the season, Kristaps Porzingis played for Boston. In game 1, Kristaps Porzingis had not yet made his season debut for the Celtics as he dealt with an injury that cost him most of last postseason. So the fact that Kristaps Porzingis didn't play, and you saw Evan Mobley go off for a really big night, and then when Kristaps Porzingis returned to the floor, obviously this wasn't the first game that he played back. He had played in a couple of games prior to that Cavs game, but Evan Mobley looks like a different player, looks like a much worse player. Now, how much of that is because of Kristaps Porzingis versus how much of that is Evan Mobley maybe just had an off night on those nights? I don't have that specific answer, but I do think that Kristaps Porzingis probably had something to do with it. He probably had something to do with the fact that Evan Mobley wasn't great. So Mobley's worst game of the season by Basketball Reference's game score. And I don't always agree with this, but I do think sometimes it's at least worth looking at. His worst game of the season was the most recent game against Boston. Mobley was 3 of 14. He finished with 7 points on 14 shots, 0 of 4 from 3, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, no blocks, no steals. He was essentially a non-factor for the Cavs. And for the Cavs to only lose by 7 in a game when Evan Mobley has that type of performance, I think there's a way to spin that positively, right? Like you can look at that and say, man, if Evan Mobley just plays an average game, the Cavs win that game, right? Well, that's probably true, but getting Evan Mobley to play above average, I think is going to be a big key. And then you look at the other game that Kristaps Porzingis played in against the Cavs. The Cavs won that one. They won by 4. There were some other pieces for Boston that were missing, but Mobley was 4 of 13. Now, he had 10 rebounds in this one and 4 assists. Like, he had a better all-around game, but he only scored 9 points. So you can do the math here, but if you want, I'll do the math for you here. But in the 2 games that Evan Mobley has played against Kristaps Porzingis, he's averaging 8 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 3 assists on 7 of 27 shooting, 0 of 6 from deep. Those numbers will not be good enough for the Cavs to win on Friday night. Those numbers definitely will not be good enough for the Cavs to beat the Celtics 4 times in May. Because ultimately, I think that's what so much of this game is about on Friday. That's what makes this game so exciting, I think, to cover. I think that as a fan, that's what should make this game riveting, is that this is the closest peek into what we could potentially be seeing between these two teams when late May rolls around. We're talking about the Eastern Conference Finals, right? Like, this is a true opportunity for that. And if the Cavs are going to win a series against Boston, which I think they're more than capable of doing, would they be underdogs? Yeah. But I don't think that this is something where the Boston Celtics would just roll over them because the Celtics are better. I don't believe that. But for them to win 4 of those games, they need Evan Mobley to be the guy that he was in the first game against the Boston Celtics. They need him to be a guy that really steps up and shows out, because if he's that guy, the Cavs are really, really difficult to beat. They're really, really tough to beat when Evan Mobley has that type of performance. So go back to that game on November 19th, and he played 38 minutes, which I believe is still the most minutes he's played in a game, but he was 8 of 13 from the floor, scored 22 points, 11 boards, 6 assists. He was awesome. He was awesome on both ends of the floor. If that is who Evan Mobley is on Friday night, I feel very confident about the Cavs winning. If that is who Evan Mobley is consistently in a postseason series against Boston, I think you have to like the Cavs' chances. But Evan Mobley, unfortunately for the Cavs, has not been that in the 2 games that he's played against Boston, in which Kristaps Porzingis has played. Now, Porzingis not on the injury report for Boston going into Friday night, so he will be playing. And I will talk about the Cavs injury report coming up in segment number 3, because they got great news, and I think that makes this game all the more exciting. But for the Cavs to get past Boston, they need Evan Mobley to be a big part of it. And Evan Mobley, as we've seen all year, is more than capable of being a big part of it. When he's really good, the Cavs are nearly impossible to beat. They're fantastic when he has good games, because he's that important to them and because he's that good of a player. And then when you look at, that's how they're 48-10, because Evan Mobley has been such a big part of it. And of course, it's not only him, but he's got a lot of responsibility there too. And then you also look at it. I don't know how much this is going to come into effect on Friday. And I had a really interesting conversation with John Corrales from Locked On Celtics that went up on his podcast feed. So if you want to check that out, head on over to Locked On Celtics and listen to our conversation. But I think that Evan at times will have the opportunity to defend Jason Tatum. If I had to bet, he will probably start the game defending Jason Tatum. And I know Jason Tatum is a fantastic player. So for the Cavs to get past Boston, they're going to need Evan to not only be really good offensively, which we know he's capable of doing, but they need him to be great defensively. And we know he's capable of doing that. I would anticipate that he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year. Can talk about his odds on FanDuel coming up in a second. But having that sort of defensive weapon at the Cavs' disposal, I think needs to be useful in this particular matchup. And it's not always going to be against Tatum, because I think there are some really interesting lineups the Cavs can throw out there against the Boston Celtics that could really make life difficult for Boston. And I think maybe we're going to see some of those on Friday night. I don't know how much. I don't know how much the Cavs would like to potentially save for the postseason, but Evan Mobley's part of that. And I think Evan Mobley could have a big hand in maybe slowing down Jason Tatum and forcing Boston to live in a much more uncomfortable area offensively than they'd like to be in. That is what I'm watching for as far as Evan Mobley goes. But I think first and foremost, we can count on Evan to have a really good night defensively because he's been that his entire career. Offensively, he has taken great strides this year, and there's no doubt about that. That's why he's going to likely be an all-NBA player. But he needs to be that type of offensive player on Friday night in Boston, and then again in the Eastern Conference Finals should these two teams meet. If the Cavs win that matchup, if Evan Mobley is, I think, the third best player on the floor, both on Friday night and in a series against Boston, the Cavs will win. But I don't know that that's a for sure thing. But if it does happen, I really do like Cleveland's chances. Another matchup, very important for the Cavs, well, that involves Darius Garland. We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, or maybe you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, right? We've seen that. I mean, we saw the Cavs have that against the Boston Celtics earlier this year. Maybe that's, maybe they're not in that position on Friday night. I don't know. I can't tell the future, but you can stay in the action. Plus, if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. FanDuel's live betting feature keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether you're backing your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. You never have to feel like you miss your chance. Plus, the app is very easy to use, and when you win, because, confident you're going to find some winners out there, you get paid instantly. Another thing with FanDuel I wanted to mention, they've got betting odds on the awards. And right now, Evan Mobley, as I mentioned, is the odds-on favorite to win the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year award on FanDuel. He's plus 110. Jaren Jackson Jr. of Memphis is in second at plus 155. So there, I do think, is a little bit of value still to be had with Evan Mobley. So head on over to FanDuel if you agree with that. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel, FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said at the top of the show, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. And matchup number 2 that I'm watching for, not only on Friday night, but in a potential Eastern Conference Finals series between the Cavs and the Boston Celtics, it is Darius Garland against Jrue Holiday. So Jrue Holiday, like Kristaps Porzingis, has not played in every matchup that the Cavs have had against the Boston Celtics so far this year. Jrue played in the first one, and I thought made life really, really difficult on Darius Garland. I think that there's a case to be made that the first game this year that the Cavs lost in Boston, Darius Garland had the worst game of his career. And I think Jrue Holiday was a big part of that. So in that game in which the Cavs only lost by 3 points, Darius Garland finished 3 of 21 shooting, 0 of 6 from 3, did have 7 assists and 2 turnovers. He scored 8 points. The Cavs were -9 with him on the floor. That was, by Basketball Reference's game score, the worst game he's played all season, and it's not particularly close. I mean, the other low game score numbers he has came in games where he didn't play very much because the Cavs blew out their opponent. So this is by far, I think, the worst game he's played all season, and maybe the worst game that he's played in his entire career. And if he has that type of performance, and to his credit, that's not what he's been in the other games against Boston, but the Cavs can't win if he's not playing at the same level that he's been at. A big part of the reason why the Cavs are where they are is because what Darius Garland was last year is so different from who he's become this year, where, last year talked about a ton, don't need to rehash it, but it was a nightmare of a season. And this year, I think he's having the best season of his career. I think that he should be in the discussion for an all-NBA spot. Will it happen? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I think he's kind of on the bubble, but I do think that there's a case to be made that he's having one of the 15 best seasons in the entire NBA this year. And that is really impressive to me. And if he continues to play like that, you feel much better about this matchup. So the best game that Garland had against Boston so far this year, that came in the game the Cavs won back December 1st. Jrue Holiday didn't play in that one. Garland was the most efficient he's been against Boston in a game this season. It wasn't a great game by his standards, but he finished 5 of 12, made 4 threes, did have 8 assists, had 5 rebounds, scored 22 points, didn't turn the ball over at all, which is not a common theme between the Boston games. In one game, he had 3 turnovers. Another game, he had 2 turnovers. The game Jrue Holiday didn't play in, he didn't have a single turnover. I don't think that is some coincidence. I think that's because Jrue Holiday is somebody who does defensively give a lot of guards problems, right? Jrue Holiday, I think, is one of the best guard defenders in the NBA. I don't know if I want to call him one of the best perimeter defenders still, but I do think he's one of the best guard defenders in basketball. And I think at times we've seen Darius Garland take the brunt of that. So if Garland plays well, let's say he has the same game he had the last time the Cavs played the Celtics, where that was in the loss. He scored 25 points. He wasn't crazy efficient. He was 8 of 20 from the floor, 3 of 8 from 3. Like, that is an okay night, but he only had 3 assists and had 3 turnovers. Like, they need him to be, I think, at a higher level than that to be successful. Now, is he capable of doing this? Absolutely. Darius Garland is a fantastic player who's having a phenomenal season. And if he does that, if that is the type of game he has, the Cavs can win. They can win. They need a lot of things to go right. But if he plays the way that he played on the night that Jrue Holiday was not on the floor for Boston, then you like the Cavs' chances a lot. And the third matchup that I think is really important is Donovan Mitchell against anybody, because the Cavs have somebody who is a true superstar. They have somebody who I believe is a top 10 player in basketball in Donovan Mitchell. I don't know that he always gets the credit that he deserves for what he's accomplished in the league, for how good that he's been as a member of the Cavs. I don't think he gets the credit for how good he's been this year, because his counting stats are not what we're used to them being, partially because he's taken a step back so that 2 guys I already talked about in Garland and Mitchell, or Garland and Mobley, could thrive. And I think that we were reminded, the best reminder of his greatness this year came in the game they won against Boston, where Donovan scored 20 points in the 4th quarter. He was perfect. I think he hit 4 threes in that quarter. Asking him to be that is not fair. It's not, you can't expect that to happen. Like, that is an outlier outcome. He's capable of it, certainly, as we've seen, because he is a superstar. He can put the cape on. But you can't ask him to be that every night. You can't ask anybody to be that every night. If you do, you're not going to be very successful. And part of the beauty of this Cavs team is they haven't had to ask him to be that guy very often. But I do think that there are certain matchups where they need a little bit more from Donovan Mitchell. I don't think the best way to say it is they need more from him than what he's been giving them. I think that his responsibility needs to grow in some games. I think that's probably a better way to put it, because Donovan Mitchell has been doing exactly what has been asked of him all season long, and it has led to great success. What I think Donovan would probably say is the most successful regular season so far of his career, and I think without question the best chance that Donovan Mitchell has had in his entire career to be an NBA champion. I don't think that second one is particularly close. I think that this Cavs team is much better suited for postseason basketball than any of the teams that he played on in Utah. Plus, for being honest, the Eastern Conference is a little bit weaker than the Western Conference was at that point. But the Cavs haven't had to ask Donovan Mitchell to carry a very heavy load on a night in, night out basis. In Friday night's game against Boston, I think they should probably ask him to carry a little bit of a heavier load. And in a series against the Boston Celtics, is it going to be Donovan Mitchell and, dragging everybody else along? No, of course not. That's never what this team's going to be. They have too many talented guys. Of course, if injuries happen, like, maybe we could get there, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's not going to be that. It's going to be the collection of this group, because the Cavs are better than the sum of their parts, where they have a lot of really talented guys, but the way that they fit together, the way that they play together, the way that everything works so cohesively for them, they are, I think it's fair to say, a little bit of an overachieving team, where that their ceiling maybe shouldn't be as high as it actually is this year, because they work together so well. And this is as big of a compliment, I think, as you can pay to a team, is that they are greater than the sum of their parts. And the best part of that is the parts are really good, right? Like Donovan Mitchell's a superstar. Evan Mobley, I think, is a top 15 player. I think Darius Garland this year has been a top 15 player. So for those to be the parts and they're still sort of maximizing the as a whole, I think is a really good thing. But there are going to be nights where they're going to need to ask Donovan Mitchell to do more than they've been asking him to do. And I think in a series against Boston, on Friday night against Boston, it might be time to do that. And Donovan has, when needed, when he's been called upon, he's been able to do that for the most part. He's had some off nights, as everybody has, and there have been some nights where his teammates have picked him up, and that's how this works. But on Friday night, if Donovan Mitchell can go off for a big game, something that we all know that he's capable of, I think that makes life easier for a lot of other guys. And I think one of the things that he's done that has made his season so fun is he has allowed other guys to thrive by doing less. I think that against Boston on Friday night and maybe in a series, Donovan Mitchell can allow other guys to thrive by doing more. And I think that maybe we see one of the best games of the year on Friday night in Boston. There are a few other things that we need to talk about. The injury report came out. Great news for the Cavs. Plus, DeAndre Hunter's first game against the Boston Celtics as a member of the Cavs. How does that factor into things? We'll do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. If you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. And Locked On Cavs now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter, your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all new free Locked On Cavs newsletter. So the Cleveland Cavaliers injury report came out about 5:30 on Thursday evening. And for just the third time this year, the Cavs are going to have their entire complement of players available. Darius Garland, of course, has missed the previous 2 games with a left hip contusion, not listed on the injury report. It means he's good to go. There were 3 people listed on the injury report. It was JT Thor, it was Imani Bates, it was Luke Travers. All 3 guys out as part of their 2-way contracts. That does not count as an injury. So the Cavs have a clean sheet. It's just the third time this year that they will be playing a game with their entire rotation available. Now, on Boston's side, I don't know who's going to be available. Jaylen Brown is questionable. He did not play on Wednesday night against Detroit with, I think, a deep thigh contusion or something along those lines. Jrue Holiday is also questionable. Luke Cornett is questionable. That one I don't think factors in quite as much as the first 2. But I do hope that both Brown and Holiday are able to play for Boston. I hope that we see both of these teams at full strength because I want this to be a playoff preview. I want to see what the Cavs are able to give a full strength Boston Celtics. I want to see what the Boston Celtics are able to do against a full strength Cavs team. I think that makes this matchup all the more exciting if that's what's on the floor on Friday night inside TD Garden. And then the other part of this that is very interesting to see is how are the Cavs going to use DeAndre Hunter in this matchup? We, of course, have seen DeAndre Hunter play the Celtics before. It's just that he was wearing a Hawks uniform while doing so. We've not seen the Cavs, one, at full strength against Boston, and we've not seen them with DeAndre Hunter against Boston because the Cavs lost to the Celtics most recently before the trade happened. So how are they going to match up with the Celtics? I would not anticipate Kenny Atkinson making a change to the starting lineup for this game specifically. Maybe when the postseason arrives, if this is a series, maybe the starting lineup looks differently then. I'm not sure. We'll kind of have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But at what point does Hunter come in? Who does Hunter defend? What do the lineups surrounding DeAndre Hunter look like? And the Cavs, I do think it's fair to say, are still searching for data surrounding what lineups work best with DeAndre Hunter. Now, the early returns are great. Like, the Cavs have been a terrific team since acquiring him. They've been the best in basketball, and by a very wide margin in the 6 games that he's played. But what does it look like against Boston? What works with him in the lineup against Boston? How does he look offensively? Who does he defend? Those, I think, are really important questions that we don't have the answer to yet, that we should get a good answer to Friday night. And that is one of the things that I do think should be found very exciting. I view this as a really important game. As I mentioned, the Cavs don't, the rest of the season, have a game against this type of opponent. There are 3 teams that I think are capable of winning the finals this year. I think it's Oklahoma City, I think it's the Cavs, and I think it's the Boston Celtics. If a team other than those 3 teams won the finals in June, I would be surprised, and you should be surprised too, because history tells us that unless you reach 40 wins before you reach 20 losses, you typically don't win the title. It's happened a couple times in the modern era. I think 4 times basically in the last 45, 50 years it's happened. So it's pretty infrequent. There are 3 teams this year, you can guess who reached 40 wins before they reached 20 losses. I'll give you a hint. It's the only 3 teams this year that don't have 20 losses on their resume so far. And the Cavs have gone 1-1 against the Thunder. The win in Cleveland was great. The loss in Oklahoma City was real bad. They've gone 1-2 against Boston. The win in Cleveland was great. The losses have been close games. They look like 2 teams that are relatively evenly matched. If Friday night is another close game, I think that would probably check out. Like, I would not be surprised the least bit if that's the case. But I also think that this is unfair to the Cavs, and I admit that. But this is going to be a game which people are going to draw a lot of conclusions. I'm not saying that you can throw out the games they played against OKC or the 3 games that they played against Boston, because I don't think that you can. What I am saying is that this game is going to matter more than any of those, because 1, it's later in the season. 2, the Cavs are fully healthy. And 3, they're a different team than they were in any of the other games that they've played so far. And any of the 5 games they've played to date against the other 2 best teams in the league, they were not the team they are right now. They didn't have DeAndre Hunter. Karis LeVert was playing. George Niang was playing. They were a much different team. Just, the way they were built was different. The guys that were playing were different. That matters. That is absolutely something that matters. So it's not fair to the Cavs that they're going to have a 1-game sample size against another elite team, and that's what we're going to judge them on. But that's the truth, is that this game is going to be looked at as not just 1 of 82. And there have been certain games throughout the season that are not just 1 of 82. You think back to the first loss of the season in Boston. That was absolutely, for them, they can say it was 1 of 82. It was not 1 of 82. Only because it was the NBA Cup. I'm joking. But this game is going to be looked at as the most important game they play for a while. At the very least, until the start of the postseason. And maybe even after that. Like, there's a world out there, I think, where you can make the case that the game they play tonight is more important than some of the games they'll play in the first round of the postseason. Say they face the Orlando Magic in the first round and they're up 3-0. What do you think is going to be more important? How they play Friday night or game 4 in Orlando? Probably Friday night. This is a very important game. I think the Cavs are going to treat it as a very important game. I hope Boston treats it as a very important game, because I do think that in late May, we could get an epic 7-game series between these 2 teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if either team won, because I think they're both great basketball teams. And I just hope that Friday night gives us a little peek into it. I hope Boston takes it seriously. I believe the Cavs are going to take it seriously. And this has potential to be one of the best games of the season. And I think it is going to be the most important one that the Cavs play. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. I do appreciate it. Very much appreciate it. Wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. I will be in Boston tonight. I'm recording this Thursday night. I fly to Boston Friday morning. I will have a podcast from Boston somewhere. Maybe it'll be inside the arena. Maybe it'll be in my hotel room. I don't know, but I will have a podcast from Boston that will be up first thing Saturday morning. So make sure you're subscribed anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Click that subscribe button on YouTube right now and hit the notification bell as well. And before you're here, throw me a thumbs up, because I don't want you to miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I will be back talking about whatever happens in the game against the Celtics tonight on Saturday right here on Locked On Cavs.